Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Selena. Thanks, everybody, for being here. There's all kinds of stories like Tasha and JP's that we get to hear about, but we don't always all get to hear about them, but we hear about whether it's Kathy or Sue or Tasha and JP, but really you're the story behind the story, because without each and every one of you, it wouldn't happen. So I want to tell you another story, brief this morning. It's the story of Ruth and Naomi, kind of why we are who we are, why we do what we do. When I was little, at night, my dad would tuck me into bed, pray with me, and quite often I'd ask him to tell me a story, or he'd offer to tell me a story. And I had usually the option. I could pick 3 or 4 elements in the story. So, a submarine, a clown, an ice cream, whatever it was. And then my dad would think for a couple minutes, and then he would tell me a short little bedtime story, and that would be it. And so I want to tell you a story, but some of the elements of this story are death, loss, immigration, famine, identity confusion, infertility, vulnerability, a female feeling she needs to use her physical features and body to protect herself and get ahead. Those are some of the elements in the story of Ruth and Naomi. It's all fit in there. And Ruth and Naomi is kind of who we are. And it's a story in the Bible. It's over 4 short chapters, and it is an amazing story of recovery. And so I want to walk you through it a little bit because, again, whether you are familiar with the story or not, you'll see the different services we provide, the programs we offer, the facilities we have, and hopefully you'll see yourself in there saying, we meet people at this point. And some of the icons are that we just kind of have these cool things put together that kind of, this is the recovery journey, and it tends to start at the bottom. And as we work together and walk alongside people, we want to see it end at the top. It doesn't necessarily go 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be fantastic. It sometimes goes 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1. So it's not always a linear journey, but this is the journey. In the story of Ruth and Naomi, at the beginning, Naomi is the mother-in-law, Ruth is the daughter-in-law. And there's famine and there's loss, and they think there's nothing for us to do. And so simply trying to stay alive, they leave as immigrants and refugees and go to a foreign land. And they're this family and their boys, or they get married and the boys grow, but all of a sudden the wives die, the dad dies, and they're foreigners in this land with nothing. They've lost everything. And you see them, they're dealing with grief, sorrow, loss, and trauma, and they just think my life is worse. They want to change their names. Don't call me this name. Change my name because my life is just bitterness. Everything is terrible. And from that, we recognize as a mission that as life happens to people, people find themselves in places of loss, trauma, grief, sorrow, confusion, kind of living in places that they never thought they'd want to live in, and simply making decisions just to stay alive. That's where things are at. And we recognize that. And so first off, we say as a mission, we want to acknowledge that happens to people. And that's not any judgment on them. That's just a reality of the world we live in. And when people find themselves in that place, they need people to come alongside them. Because at the end of chapter 1, Naomi decides, you know what? There's nothing for him here. Life couldn't possibly get any worse. So I'm going to try to make my way home. She says, I'm going to begin this recovery journey. As she begins that, Ruth says to her, I'm going to stick with you. From that, we recognize, you know what? The journey of recovery is never, or rarely, if ever, a journey that someone walks alone. They need someone who says, you want to make your way towards home, wherever that would be? You're going to need someone who's going to walk with you. And Ruth says to Naomi, I'm going to stick with you. I'm not going to leave you. Where you go, I will go. We are bonded together. And again, that's not that we're never going to leave people, but that's our commitment as an organization. As people say, you know what, I want to begin this journey of recovery. I'm just barely staying alive and it couldn't possibly get anywhere. We say, you know what, we're going to walk with you. We're going to support you. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, they get back to Naomi's homeland and they begin to work the system. There were things in place where you could go out and work in the fields and farm and try to get enough food to stay alive. And so what they begin to do is they just begin to work the system. Here's some things that were in place so that people could recover a little bit, and they go out and they begin to do what they can do. And so that's where we get some of our recovery. You know what? There's things that need to be in place so that we can support people. But as Ruth goes out, she meets this other person, and he comes along and he's curious about her. He wants to know her name. He wants to know she's more than a person. He finds a bit about her background. He learns her story. And then he comes and he meets her with kindness, with gentleness. He recognizes that she's in a vulnerable spot, and so he protects her. He tells some of his workers and employees, make sure she's safe, and he tells her, make sure you stay here and we'll watch over you. And so we recognize from that, you know what, as people begin their journey of recovery or are on their journey of recovery, they need people who are curious. What's their name? What's their story? Because they're not a position, they're not a label, they're not a category, they're people. And so we begin to find out their story, so we can relate to them with kindness, with tenderness, with empathy. And then we recognize, you know what, they may be in a vulnerable position, so we're going to do what we can to provide some protection. As they're working this journey of recovery and kind of moving forward at whatever pace they decide, we're going to say, we're here to protect you. And so that happens in chapter 2, and that's where we get that icon of a heart kind of being put back together as life begins to be put back together. You get into chapter 3, and Naomi says to Ruth, if this is really going to work, if this, recovery journey, she doesn't use those words, but if this life getting brought back together is really going to have any stability, we need to find you housing. There needs to be a place of secure housing. So as Ruth and Naomi, that's part of what we do. It may start out with an emergency mat program or an emergency weather shelter or Revive or Pathways or Oasis, men's and women's bed-based recovery. But then maybe it's the interchange. Maybe it's the family center. And we're looking at ways we can help more people get into housing as we look toward the coming years to say, if this whole journey of recovery is going to be established in people's lives, they have to have housing. Some way, shape, or form. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but that kind of takes place in chapter 3. So there we are. By the time you get to chapter 4, Ruth finds herself in a healthy relationship, surrounded by a very supportive community of people who believe in her and what she's doing and the choices she's making, and she has a future filled with hope. And that's the journey that 4 short chapters in the book of Ruth tell. And that's where we get our name from. That's where we get kind of, these are the things we want to be involved in. And hopefully you can find yourself somewhere in there. We recognize that it may start out with people just saying, I just need to stay alive. I just need to stay alive. I need to have a place to get me out of the cold. I need to have a place where I can be supervised as I use whatever substance I'm using at the time. I need to have a place that's going to protect me and feed me. And so you know what? We're going to step in right there. And we're just, because we recognize people find themselves in places of grief, loss, trauma, and that's there. And with kindness and tenderness and empathy, we just meet with them there. And then when, if, and as they say, you know what, I want to begin a journey of recovery, say, you know what, we're here with you. We're going to walk with you. We'll support you in that. We'll make that journey. And then they get into chapter 2. We're going to protect them in their vulnerability and help them as they work through the different systems in place, whatever that may be. We're going to find them housing as best we can so that we can see them in healthy relationships, connected to supportive communities, have a future filled with hope. So that's the story of Ruth and Naomi's. That's who you are, who we are, and that's why we do what we do. So thank you. Because again, I sit in one chair, but it couldn't be done without all the things that we do together. And again, we are a Christian faith-based organization. We started earlier this morning. One of the songs that we sang is, lead me in your love to those around us. And that would be right at the center of all we want to do. We recognize, you know what? Love is the most transforming power in this world. And we want to be led in love to the people around us and love them well. Love them wherever they are, whoever they are, however they identify, and just say, it's our job to love you well, support you, walk with you, and hopefully see you as you walk forward in a journey of recovery. So that's a little bit about who we are. How many knew the story of Ruth and Naomi's prior to that? How many thought that these 2 women over here were Ruth and Naomi? Exactly. They get asked that. We get asked that sometimes. So when am I going to meet Ruth and Naomi? And well, someday we hope you will, but it's probably not going to be for a while. So that's who we are. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the next few years. 21-ish years ago, it was one of the trivia things, Ted and Ann Stoker, couple who wanted to be led in love, started handing out sandwiches at Five Corners in Chilliwack. And over those 21 years, it's grown now to where we are. You know, there's the Community Outreach Center with Pathways and the Emergency Weather Shelter and Revive, and that's kind of one facility. And then we've got our Oasis men's and women's bed-based recovery programs that are offered. The women's is in the Family Center. The men's is in the Interchange. Then we've got the Interchange, which is 59 residents that we help provide housing for with wraparound supports and people that come alongside them, our client navigators, some of you in the room, tenant engagement workers to say, we want to put supports around you because it's never just about the service or never just about the program. It's about people walking alongside people in community. We had one of our participants who was moving from one of our facilities to another facility into a more, from a somewhat secure housing to a way more secure housing, and you think this is an amazing thing. But when we were asked the participant, hey, what do you feel about this? Well, there was some happiness there. They said, you know what, I kind of feel sad because my friends are here, because I've developed community here. And it was, again, as a testament to what you do. It's never just about the food. It's never just about the service. It's never just about the program. It's never just about any of that. It's about people and welcoming them into community and supporting them along. And again, it couldn't be done without you. And so there's that, there's the Interchange, and then there's the Family Center, which again, trivia, you already know, 36 units, and the medical clinic as we help people and we just walk people forward. So that's where we are today. And again, couldn't be done without you. As we look to the future, right now on any given day, there's probably about 350-ish people on every single day that we're connected to one way or another through housing or meals or programs, about 350 people that we have contact with in some service. As we look to 10 years from now, one of the goals we said is, you know what, we'd love to see that be about 1,000 people. 1,000 people a day that Ruth and Naomi's interacts with. So that's going to mean more facilities, more programs, more staff, a bigger room to have our staff retreat in. So, and again, when that'll be, we're not exactly sure. What'll be first, we're not exactly sure. But we're saying, you know what? You do such a good job of coming alongside people and welcoming them into community that more people need to experience that. And so there's the board and the leadership team are saying, how can we do that? So looking at different programs, because one of the unique things I think we do really well is we have this continuum of care. There's services here, and we hand them off to here, and we hand them off to here, so we actually can walk with people from one place all the way to the beginning. It's not just a service we provide here, and then again, that's great, but we have this niche, we would say, of our transformative continuum of care. Some of our values. I'm going to go real quick because my energy level is less than yours, so I'm going to drain on, and so it's all right. But again, these are some. We sat down as a leadership team, and we were led through this exercise. Say, what are our values? And at first you think, oh, well, our values, they should be this, they should be this. And the person leading us, we said, no, it's not what you think they should be. It's what they already are. And we're going to help you identify what already are values. And again, hopefully, I'll go through the list quickly. We're not going to take a long time with this. You'll hear about this in lots of other formats. But hopefully, you'll see that even in the story of Ruth and Naomi. See, our first value, and this is not in order of importance, but just the first on the list, is grace. We just absolutely believe in grace. We believe in second chances, third chances, fourth chances. Again, the journey of recovery is never a ready, set, go, 1, 2, 3, finished. It's a journey that involves, we know, some relapses, some mistakes, the need for second, third, and fourth. So one of our values is grace. We know people need second and third chances, and we are going to give that freely. It's not going to be like, oh, sheesh. Second value is hope. We won't give up. We believe, and you'll hear this when Guy shares his story a little later, recovery is possible for every single person. We don't write off anybody. We don't say, oh, they're too far gone. Recovery might look different for lots of different people, but recovery is possible for every single person. That's just one of our values as an organization. There's not going to be a single individual that we will ever encounter that we wouldn't recognize the face of Jesus on them and say, you know what, I don't know, I think it's too far gone. No. One of our values is hope. And recovery is possible. A third value is people. We just recognize the inherent value in every single person. So on that person there, and that's in this journey of recovery right at the top. I think it's the second bullet on the top one. Recognizing their inherent value. We want to be an organization that so believes in the value of every single person that even though they may not know it or believe it, as we just walk alongside them long enough, they will begin to believe in their value. Their sense of confidence and esteem, any shame, any guilt, any condemnation would just be pushed aside because we believe in people. Not because of what they produce, not because of the skills they have, not because of how hard they work. No, we just believe in people. Because again, as a Christian organization, we know every single person bears the image of God. And so we believe in people. However they identify, wherever they may meet us, wherever we may meet them, we believe in people. Fourth value, curiosity. We want to learn. We want to learn your name. We want to learn your story. We recognize that nobody just arrives wherever they arrive, just ta-da. Everybody's got a story. In the same way, in the story of Ruth, they came out and said, hey, tell me a little bit about you. What's your backstory? They found a little bit of history. We want to be curious. We don't want to just make assessments or judgments on any person when we meet them. We realize they have a name, they have a story, they have an experience. And so we want to be curious people about the story of people and about learning. Lots of the challenges we face, whether it's addiction, recovery, substance use, housing, they're changing, becoming more complex. And so we don't want to say, well, that's the way we've always done it. We want to be learners across the organization. Say, because one of the things we want to do by year 3 is that we as an organization want to be recognized in the city of Chilliwack as experts, if you will, not the best, not the only, but Ruth and Naomi's, their team, their staff, their workers, they know what they're doing when they talk about addiction recovery. They know what they're doing when they're talking about housing. They know what they're doing when they're talking about some of the programs they have for their peers, because they're learned and they're studied and they listened and they value people and they're curious. And again, we couldn't do any of that without you. And so we want to put on our learning caps. We want to open our eyes. We want to open our ears and be curious. How do we solve the problem of housing? How do we solve the problem of toxic drug supply? How do we solve the problem of recovery? How do we solve the problem of feeding? How do we solve the problem of? Who knows? But when you value people and you work in community and you're curious, we'll find a way. The other value is trust. We serve a vulnerable segment of society whose trust has been broken by so many different people in so many different ways. And so one of our values is trust. We're going to show up when we said we'll show up. We're going to do what we said we will do. And over time, after time, after time, after time, we just believe that as we show ourselves trustworthy, we will help people whose trust has been broken learn to trust again. Trust themselves. Trust some of the services we want them to access. Trust some of the resources that our city and our community have available to. But to a people who have no sense of trust, good luck. Hey, you should go there. Hey, you should listen to him. Hey, you should try this. No thanks, because I've gone there and I've listened to him and I've tried that and it's never worked and they haven't done what they've said they're going to do and they haven't showed up where they said they're going to show up. And so just trust. We will do what we say we'll do as best we can. We're human, we're going to make mistakes, and we'll show up. And our sixth value is partnership. We don't do any of this alone. Partnership with the person we're walking with. Again, it's their journey. It's not our journey. It's not our journey to decide what it is, what the next step should be. It's their journey, but we're going to partner with them in it. How can we support? How can we walk? And we're going to do that in partnership together, in the teams you work with, in Revive, Pathways, Oasis, Interchange. And we're going to do that in partnership as an organization. Revive and Pathways with Oasis, Oasis with Interchange, Interchange with the Family Center, all of it with the New Hope Medical Clinic. And we're going to do that in partnership with some incredible other organizations in our city that we serve alongside. Ann Davis, Salvation Army, PCRS, the list goes on and on. We don't do this alone. And we're going to do this in partnership with the faith community. And we're going to do this in partnership with people. It's a partnership. So those are our values. I'm not going to, again, grace, hope, people, curiosity, trust, and partnership. Those are things that we say, you know what? They've always been our values. We may not have articulated them that way. And so in this exercise that we were led through, that this is who we are. And this is how we want to show up. And we want people to be known by. And so again, over the next few years, we would see some of the growth in services. This next coming year, I got to make sure, we're hoping to launch a dental clinic. We had the gala, we raised all this money, it was fantastic. It was an amazing night. So we're hoping November, somewhere around there, it'll be operational. They'll be able to welcome people into it, they can get some dental care. So, yeah, absolutely. One of the big things we're doing, and it may not seem that exciting, is we are going through a process of just saying, how do we do what we do? So that as new staff come on, we recognize that maybe things haven't always been as clear as they could have been. Maybe new staff had to come on and say, well, I had to figure it out, or different things. So you say, no, we want to make sure, because this journey is so important. And trust is so important. We want to be able to say, we'll do what we said we'll do. We'll show up when we said we'll show up. So we're as a leadership team, we're kind of looking at all the different aspects of the organization and say, okay, how do we do this? How do we do intakes? How do we do community meals? How do we do addiction recovery? Again, not that there's a formula, but it simplifies things so that we can be more efficient, so we can be more effective, so that trust can be established. So that's over the course of this year, we're working on that. It may not sound exciting. Some days it doesn't seem very exciting, but I think it's going to be one of the most valuable things we do so we can enhance what we do and serve more people. So that the 350 people that we serve every day now, we can scale that up, because there's more than just 350 people in our city that need that. So we can scale it up to 500, scale up to 1,000. Again, it's never about numbers, it's about people. So those are some of the things that we're involved with. Those are some of the things that when you say you work at Ruth and Naomi's, or someone asks, that's what you're a part of. These are some of the stories, Tasha and JP, that you are a part of. You may have never met Tasha and JP. You may have rarely been in the Family Center, but that's your story. It couldn't be told without you, because we are helping people from this place of just saying, they're just trying to get by. They're trying to make sure they stay alive. And when they begin to say, you know what, I want to make my way home. So we'll walk with you with kindness, with curiosity, with trust. We'll protect you when you're vulnerable. We'll help you do some of the work as you're prepared to do it. We'll find you some housing. But we believe with God's help, we will get there. And it won't be 1, 2, 3, 4, and it won't be this year. For some, it may be a whole lot faster. For some, it may be way slower. That's not our place to judge. It's to say, we're here. We're going to walk with you. And when you're ready to take your next step, we'll take it with you, and we'll help you, and we'll support you. And we believe that we will see lives transformed, that we'll see way, way, way more stories like Tasha and JP.